2005 Ford Focus, front brake pads and machine rotors. I'm Brian Esser from How To Automotive, and I'm going to walk you through that process. Now we need to get the vehicle up in the air and remove the front wheels. If you're doing this at home, use floor jacks and go ahead and remove your front wheels. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do is pop this little tip off here. And just use a flat blade screwdriver like this, stick it in there, and give it a twist. So I'll stick it in and give it a twist like this, and that'll pop the clip out. The next step is to pop the little rubber caps, plastic caps off the back, or the where the bolts go through the caliper. So there's going to be one there, one here. Pop those off, and inside there is a 7mm Allen. Show you those. So remove the two 7mm Allen sockets. So you want to go ahead and pull these pins all the way out. Now that you got the two pins out, go ahead and set those aside. And after that, you can go ahead and work your calipers off. And then you can just go ahead and set it up on top of the suspension here. And go ahead and remove your outer pad and set that aside. Now we're going to remove this bracket. And on the back, there's a 15mm bolt here and here. Go ahead and remove those two, and this whole bracket will come off. Now that you got the caliper off and the bracket off, now you want to measure your rotor to make sure your rotor is thick enough to machine. So you'll measure it, then you'll look up the specs in a book, or it's called the brake index book, or you can look it up on like All Data Service or Mitchell on Demand, anything like that. They'll have the specs. And sometimes on some manufacturers they're actually stamped onto the rotor somewhere, and if you can read them, a lot of times they're kind of rusty and you can't read them. So you measure it, and once you determine, yes, your rotor is thick enough to machine, if you're doing this at home, what you could do is you could, if you don't have the mic and you don't have access to machining the rotors, you can take it down to your local repair shop, have them tell them the year, make, model of the car, have them measure it, and then they can look it up in their spec book and determine if it's machinable or not. And once you determine yes it is, you can have them do it for you, or if you need to replace them, go ahead and replace them. Now most likely these rotors are going to be stuck to the hub, and you're not going to be able to get them off. So what I like to do is you can take a hammer and you can strike it right here, but you want to be careful not to hit the studs. If you strike it right here, the vibration should pop the rotor free. So if you're at the shop, go ahead and check it up and go ahead and do a light cut machine on your rotor. So while your rotor's machining, you can do a little prep work. And what I like to do is, like the hub, it was rusted on, so I'm going to use a little wire brush. Now I'm going to clean this hub up a little bit. And then after my rotor's done, I'm going to slip it on over. So I'm also going to put a little attention to the bracket here. And I'm going to clean the channels out with a wire brush like this. And what you want to inspect for on this car right here is you want to make sure that there's no groove worn into it. If there are, then you may have to replace this, because what happens is the pads won't slide back and forth. They'll just stick in those little grooves. So clean these out really good and inspect them. And make sure that there's no grooves on it. And once they're good and cleaned out, so now that my bracket's cleaned out, I go ahead and slip on my new rotor, or my machined rotor, and I used a lug nut that I just flipped over backwards and screwed it in to hold it in place for me. So we're going to go ahead and put the bracket back on, but before we do, we're going to put a little blue thread sealer Loctite on the bolts, and the reason why is they don't have lock washers, and that helps prevent them from coming back out. So we'll slip the caliper back on over the rotor, and we'll torque this down to 98 foot-pounds. So now that the bracket is bolted back on at 98 foot-pounds, we need to apply some attention to the caliper itself. So you want to inspect the boot on the piston to make sure it's not ripped or torn or leaking of any fluids. And now what we need to do is get this piston back into its bore. And before we do that, what I'm going to do is lower the vehicle down and remove a couple ounces out of the master cylinder. And the reason why is I'm going to press this piston back in, and it's going to push, but I'm not going to open the bleeder screw. And it's going to push the brake fluid back up the line and into the master cylinder, and if it's if it's too full, it'll overspill into the bay. So just remove a few ounces. So we're going to open the master cylinder and suck a few ounces out. That way we don't overflow it when we press the pistons in. And if the brake fluid's dirty, then now you can recommend changing, or if you're doing this at home, you can go ahead and remove all the brake fluid and change it yourself if you like. So to push the piston back in the bore, I just use a C-clamp, and I just left the old pad in there, and I just kind of turn it like that, and that'll push the piston right in for you. So now what you want to do is you want to lube up the little pins, slide pins, and then you can put them in the back and work them in the caliper back and forth to make sure they slide. Then you can assemble your brake pads by pushing them into the caliper and just put your outer brake pad onto the housing. So now you want to torque the 7mm Allens down, and then put the plastic caps back on, and then you'll put the clip back on, and you'll put it in the holes like this, and then you kind of flare it over with your thumb, and you push it in. You're going to put your wheel on, torque it down, lower the vehicle down, and then you're going to pump the brake pedal 6 or 7 times, and that completes the job on a 2005 Ford Focus. I'm Brian Essett from Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching my videos.